your boy Young Love. I give him that treatment. Pancho leg stand and Panchi America. Banyi Dwala, Banaban, Pancho leg stand and Panchi America. Banyi Dwala, Banaban, walk on your leg, Kankara, what I know watching. Oga level leg, gear, power, leg, Panda with ya, Panchi America. Panya Dwala, Bano, Chingatonga, Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Papu Panda, Jiro, what ya be, Dwala venting. Stand up Panchi America, Banyi Dwala, Banaban, Pancho leg stand up Panchi America, Banyi Dwala, Banaban, walk on your leg, Kankara, what I know watching, Oga level leg, gear, power, leg, Panda with ya, Panchi America, Panya Dwala, Bano, Chingatonga, Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Papu Panda, Jiro, what ya be, Dwala venting.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to Lake State Media. My name is Abraham Madidin Majak. I'm one of the Lake State Media hosts. We're having breaking news going on in South Sudan today. We have received information that the two parties, SPLA-IO and SPLA-IG, they reached an agreement. So my guest for today is Usas Munjo to give us the information what's going on. Welcome to the show again, Brother Almond. So give us update what's going on. And for those of you who are watching at the Facebook and YouTube and Clubhouse, start sharing the video. This is one of the breaking news, and we are happy to these two parties to come together. I received the agreement paper here with me. So let's start discussion what this means to South Sudan. So welcome.
Thank you for hosting me for this particular moment, as you describe it as a moment of breaking news. I hope that it's a moment of breaking news with also a breaking political will and commitment that this time an agreement is reached and will be implemented genuinely without any doubt or fears or mistrust. So what happened is that for the few days, we are all aware that there's a tension among the parties signatories to the agreement, and in particular, the incumbent government under the leadership of His Excellency President Salva Kiir and the SPLM-IO under the leadership of His Excellency First Vice President Dr. Riek Macher, particularly on the implementation of Chapter 2. As you are aware that Chapter 2 is focusing on transitional security arrangement, and is one of the key cornerstones of implementing the agreement, though we normally speak that the culture of selective implementation of the revitalized agreement is not healthy. But with Chapter 2, you can't undermine it. It is really the stone foundation for any political transitioning from violence to peace, or from the current situation to peace, or from the current situation to better South Sudan that we wish. And of course, part of the biggest problem of Chapter 2 implementation, it is a concept of building a national army under the theory described in the Chapter 2 as unification of the forces of the armed groups. And here, when I said armed groups, we refer to the by then SPLA, which is now renamed as South Sudan People's Defense Force under the incumbent government. Then the SPLA-IO under the leadership of Dr. Riek Macher as the first vice president, as a commander-in-chief of SPLA-IO. And then in SOA, you have a number of groups that are armed, and they come under one umbrella of SOA, which at the end of the day is under the leadership of Abdel Baghi Ai. But the tension was not so much between the incumbent and SOA. The tension is much more between the SSPDF or the incumbent and the SPLA-IO on the ratio of sharing responsibility in the transformed national security and defense institution. So one of the biggest institution of national defense and security is what we call the command structure. By command structure, what do we refer to? We refer to a structure of the command that is under a centralized system. But when I say a centralized system, I refer to military, security, and defense order and directives. It has to come from a single center and flow a single system. So what does it mean? It means we need to have one commander-in-chief of defense and security and other organized forces, and normally all over the world, it is Excellency the President. And we need to have one chief of staff for defense, one IGP of police for interior. So that is what is referred to command structure. And of course, that plus other positions that may bring in national security, other law enforcement agencies. So they need to be centralized in a way that they have one central system. They have one center of directives and orders. And now we have different centers of orders and directives, both security and defense. For instance, SSPDF is under the command of the current president, His Excellency Salva Kiir as a commander-in-chief. So he commands the SSPDF. And His Excellency First Vice President Dr. Riek Macher is commander-in-chief of SPLA-IO before the unification. He has his own center of command, and he has his own chief of staff. And of course, if you remember, and quite some of the audience are aware, one of his former chief of staff, Simon Garwich, defected, and then he appointed another chief of staff to replace Garwich. Under SOA, you may say their commander-in-chief, I don't know whether they have agreed or they have not agreed, is Abdul Baghi Ai as vice president. But under Abdul Baghi Ai, you have different chief of staffs. You have chief of staff for other parties. I don't want to name them here, but I predicted it's over 5 chief of staffs. So a country can't exist in command structure where you have several chief of staffs and at least 3 known commander-in-chief. That one can't be. So it's one of the disputed. Why was it disputed, or why is it an area of disagreement among the parties? It is the responsibility sharing. The initial proposal that triggered the tension was opposition was saying, in terms of responsibility sharing under the command structure, they want to go for 50-50 representation. It means government takes 50 share of the command structure, and they as opposition, they take 50 share of the command structure, and their 50 share, they're going to define, they're going to share among them. That means the opposition is going to share between SPLA-IO and SOA forces. So it means the sharing will continue also. Within SOA have to share among themselves whatever they get from the 50 that they share with IO. So the good news that we have, or the breaking news we have, are the following decisions that they have reached to. And the agreement is signed in Arabic. Obviously, you know why in Arabic? Because the mediators are from Sudan. The mediators are from Sudan. So we need to wait for translation. And my take is that really we need to be keen on the translation version, because if they don't have a proper translation may create a new interpretation. So it's going to be translated from Arabic to English. So what do we see now that they have reached consensus to in terms of responsibility sharing? The ratio is 60% for the incumbent. Of course, the incumbent refers to South Sudan People's Defense Force. They take 60% of the share, and opposition takes 40% of the share, which was not enshrined in the agreement very clear, but from interviews that has happened there, that's the ratio. So it means the opposition will go with 40% share of the responsibility of the command structure. Now, among the opposition, that means SPLA-IO and SOA, they're going to share the 40%. And one of my immediate fear over the ratio of the responsibility sharing, I hope that the opposition will not drag their feet in sharing the 40%. I hope that they will use the 40% with the percentages that they have in the political responsibility sharing. But obviously, opposition also is going to discuss. IO is going to go, we as an opposition, we are the armed group, are the one who created the pressure, our withdrawal from the security mechanisms has reached out to this consensus. So the lion's share of the 40% will come to us, IO, and so I will take another one. So again, I hope that they will not drag their feet. And I hope also there will be no implications of other parties going use that particular situation to create a dragging fit among the IO and the SOA to delay sharing of the 40% among themselves. And so one of my immediate wishes is that I hope opposition will share the 40% easily and quickly, because if you see timelines that I'm going to mention out of what I've generated as outcome of the agreement in terms of bullet points 8.1, what I'm going to share, it have a clear timeline in the document of the Arabic version. So one of the things they have reached, as I've mentioned, they are able to reach to responsibility sharing 60% versus 40, 60 to incumbent, 40% to opposition. Opposition is going to share among themselves, the SPLA-IO and then the SOA, they're going to share among them. And also, by the way, my brother, I want to remind you, if IO share with the SOA, the 40%, SOA is also going to share among themselves, whatever they get from their share of the 40% from the IO. So we hope that all these sharing approaches will not drag feet and will not delay, since they have a timeline here they have mentioned. So let me move to the next points that I picked out of the Arabic agreement as some of them. One, they have agreed for the appointment of the opposition generals into the unified command structure within a week. That means if you count from today, by 11th February, that means by next week, next Monday, we're supposed to have the unification or the unified command structure is appointed. So what does it mean? It means from tomorrow onwards, as a Monday, the 40% have to be distributed among the opposition, and the opposition, like SOA, have to distribute among themselves the share they get from the 40%, and they have to immediately go for nominations of names as nomination of generals. So I don't use names, just let me use the titles. Nomination of generals to be decreed through a presidential decree. So it means SSPDF will bring the 60% share in defense and security institutions. And opposition will bring the 40%. Of course, IU will bring theirs and SOA will bring theirs, names. Then president will decree what you call the unified command structure. And of course, the decree have to be not unilateral as they have agreed now. So it means any decree comes from president is no longer described as unilateral. It will be a decree that is agreed upon. So president have to confirm, because the president decree will confirm that appointment. So it means within 1 week from now, we are supposed to have a newly constituted command structure. And I think for me, this is of benefits, by the way, to the listeners. Even if we hurry to graduate the unified forces, if you don't have a central center of directives and command for security and defense, even the unified forces will get mess in terms of operations, in terms of their institutional execution of their mandate or their constitutional mandate. So it's good now, at least they have reached to that level of forming fast command structure or reconstituting command structure as a unified one, because that's where trust and confidence is. So now here, no single party make a decision for the favor of its interest and undermining the other one. That's one of the benefit point I've reached. Second point is that graduation of the unified forces. That means the first batch of the unified forces, they'll graduate them 2 months from now. So it means at least by 3rd of May, we may have graduation of the unified forces. That means the forces that are undergoing training or have undergone training for almost 1 year plus will be graduated 2 months from now. And what does that mean? That means per the assessments that we have, that the JDB, the Joint Defense Board, and the Joint Transitional Security Committee have recently assessed, when the Deputy President of Sudan visited Juba, have assessed that the forces is amount to around 50,000. It's supposed to be 85,000 boots, but they say per now is 50,000 boots because some of them have deserted their training grounds. They may become as doing other jobs because they couldn't get any benefit, and some of them might have died with either issues related to natural factors like diseases, or some of them might have died during this exercise of fighting between defections among the parties. Some of them might have died. So I'm quite sure still, these 2 months' time, the parties are going to again carry out another new fresh assessment, because those 50,000 may not be realistic with the recent what we have seen in some parts of Upper Nile around and Mine. So likely they're going to assess the first month to go to the field and mobilize, organize them for graduation. So within 2 months. The other point they've agreed upon is abide by ceasefire and cessation of hostility agreement. This means a lot. This means from today onwards, there will be no any more fighting or military confrontation among the forces or the parties that are signatories to the agreement. And mainly I will refer to SSPDF and SPLMIU. We have seen them for a few months been exchanging trade or violations of the ceasefire. So they have recommitted themselves. And of course, if you ask me, this will be the fourth or the fifth recommitment to ceasefire if we start beginning since 2013. Of course, this is a political agreement. This is how always they are. Recommitment. Point number 5, no party should be encouraged to facilitate or motivate the defections to either sides. So it means what? They have today agreed that they are sanctioning defections. So the message to the generals that have sharp appetite of defections and those who are using defections as a source of livelihood, now they have been stopped. No more defections, whether from SSPDF to IO or from IO to SSPDF or from SSPDF to SOA or from SOA to IO. These defections is no longer there. The parties have been sanctioned. And of course, this becomes a challenge that later on I'll conclude in terms of my observation, what I think about the challenges of translating this into reality. The 6th point I've reached into is that immediate cease of media propaganda and hostile attitudes. And I think this goes to some of our audience. And I know especially in diaspora, there's some people who have very hostile propaganda. So they should know that now any hostile propaganda, any media propaganda that support one particular party concepts that undermine the other party, it's now prohibited by this recent agreement. Of course, it was there in the previous agreement, but they have brought up, and specifically, if you see the hostile propaganda between the spokesperson of the South Sudan People's Defense Force and the IO by then, and remember when President was addressing the nation, he was questioned about when the spokesperson of South Sudan People's Defense Force mentioned they are in war with IO, whether that is a decision at the High Command Council, that the High Command Council have agreed that they're declaring a war, and the President said, no, that is a personal position of the spokesperson of SSPDF, which for me is a challenging. And of course, we have seen that they've been exchanging among themselves, and even the political spokesperson of the parties also were having, and supporters who support these parties were also hostile in social media, and they've been releasing information here and there, back and forth. So this has been sanctioned now, that any media propaganda that may be hostile, that may be constituting hate speech, that undermines the spirit of implement agreement is sanctioned. The final point is that they have to prepare for phase 2 within 1 month. What does it mean? Phase 2 refers to graduation of the unified forces, because we have now phase 1 of the unified forces that are going to undergo graduation. We need to have a phase 2 of unified forces. And in phase 2, for example, that we're going to have in phase 1 and phase 2, things like, for example, state policy is going to come out very clear. Now, the document that is already in the public domain in Arabic, which is around 2-pager document. This document mainly focus on these points I've raised, but there are details of what define the positions, the titles, and the ranking and the structure of what is called command structure. These are going to be annexed, and I think it's been worked out and quoted up from tomorrow onwards. We'll have more details of how does the command structure look like, who is taking what in terms of titles and positions. So my message to the audience that be patient, don't speculate news, wait to see an official, authentic document that describe allocation of various positions. And some of us might have been aware that His Excellency President have already alerted some of the generals under his leadership that they should be ready to give their position to accommodate their colleagues, which I think it is a concept of reconstituting the defense structure, whereby opposition have to occupy some position. And of course, that require political will, that require political commitment. Otherwise, it will be another dragging feats among the parties. So my final observation, so that maybe I can receive if there's a follow-up questions, is that the agreement have also built that there's a need to build trust and confidence at the presidency. So it means this agreement have also called for regular meeting of the presidency, and they should have trust and confidence among themselves, because that's essential. And I think the point I want to conclude with is that how much we have beautiful documents, they will be undermined, they will be violated if the principles that constitute the presidency have not changed their political attitudes, if they have not regained trust and confidence to work together as a sons and daughters of the Republic of South Sudan and transition the country from this hard moment to a moment that we wish we need to reach to the South Sudan that we won when we struggled since 1983 or since 1955, or maybe since 1947, we've been struggling for the nation we won. The only opportunity that will make this agreement, which was signed some few hours ago in Juba, under the mediation or facilitation of Sudan. And remember, Sudan is a grantor to the agreement. Sudan currently is a chair of IGAD. This agreement will face similar challenges of what we have faced in the last 2.5 years. They'll face similar challenges if the political will among the principles of the parties that signed this agreement have not changed. So the only vitamin now we need to raise a sharp appetite for timely and genuine implementation of this particular agreement signed some few hours ago in Juba, it is the regaining of trust and confidence, and mainly between His Excellency the President and his Vice President of Riek Macher. If they agree, the two, they have the power of the influence in driving and transforming this country from where we are now to a better. In politics, always people disagree, but you better disagree to agree, and you disagree to agree. And once you agree to transform the society from a hard moment to a better moment, so that books of history will write your efforts for future generations to remember that some of our leaders were called so and so disagree, but they were able to transform the society from hard moment to a better moment. So for me, everything is centered on regaining political will and political trust and commitment. And this can happen among the principals, specifically His Excellency President and the first Vice President, if they're able to discipline the spoilers around them. Because one big thing that also, President may have the will, Vice President may have the will, but the spoilers around them, that may be close to them or far from them, may have a different interpretation of what has been reached some few hours ago in Juba. As South Sudanese, there's no any way that we can coexist politically if we're unable to resolve our political grievance and our political disputes in amicable manner, in a way that we say, yes, we disagree, but moment has come for us to compromise, to reach consensus, and give chance for peace to prevail. Otherwise, if we keep on continuing with the history of a curse of independence, we cannot gain. But I think we got our independence in a moment where we have PhD holders that you can count them in numbers. You can't count masters, you can't count degree, they're big in numbers. So we have human resource that is well prepared to transform the country from the hard moment to a better moment. But this comes when the top leadership have trust and confidence of working together as a partners, they start the political grievances, transforming the society to the side that they want. So for me, that would go because, and some of the spoilers are in the social media, by the way. I don't believe those spoilers, commanders-in-chief and brigadier generals of war in social media platforms. So also they need to change their attitudes. So they don't need to give a different interpretation, because some few minutes ago, I was scanning the social media before coming to this interview to see reaction. I've already started seeing some of them start sending signals of insults. What is it? Why do you this? Why do we know?
They are even doing live video right now. They are doing live section in Clubhouse right now.
So for me, the appeal is that until we change our attitudes, and one of the biggest problems with us South Sudan is that we like to analyze and we like to zero conclusion on governance from an ethnic protection point of view. Ethnicity will tear this country into pieces. And ethnicity will prove us that if we have never gone to school with our degrees, our masters. So for me, it's a high time that we take a primary responsibility to ensure that our leaders will discipline them. I know it's very hard to discipline some of them because around them, there's so much powerful spoilers, and some of them are us in the social media. So for me, time has come for us to stand up for the nation and to stand up as nationalists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, brother. Before I give one of the guys in the club, I have a couple of guys who want to ask you a question in Clubhouse. So unified forces, one commander-in-chief, and they think is really, this is one of the things that's one of the key points that hold the peace back. Now, if this one is a chip, both parties agree to unify all the forces together to be only one army for the country. This is a huge step for the country.
Yes.
And this is the path to the peace, and will be stop all of this war and other thing. So who will be, if they approve, if they unify all the forces, where the commander in chief? I know President Salva Kiir will be commander in chief. The general chief of staff, it will come from the IO or from the government side?
This is what I was in the beginning. I was saying, let's be patient, let's wait a bit, because that's the next detailed steps on the document I've seen in the social media, or we have seen publicly, the 2-page document. There's attachments to that document. Among the attachments to those documents is the distribution of the structure of the command, because the structure of the command have to be defined. Commander-in-chief, president, who is next, who is deputy, for example, is obviously let you know that the chairperson of the National Defense Committee is Excellency President, and that will be deputized by first vice president. And the next you may get that the commander or the chairperson of the National Security Committee is president, and that will be deputized by first vice president. So, and the other vice presidents are there. So, and remember, it is groups which you can name them as incumbent, IO, and so on. So they need to fit into that in terms of chief of staff, in terms of IGP, in terms of other positions that are very influential, because the unification of the command structure is to build a leadership of security and defense that pay allegiance to the Constitution, that also pay allegiance to political manifestos of where they're coming from since 2013. So one of my answer to your question is that I will ask South Sudanese, let's be patient enough. We will have these details coming out, and let us not speculate rumors. We better wait for document that the parties have reached consensus, because I've already seen some people start defining, allocating position from their own opinion. Can Philandeni, and then, you know, if those ones are here, let the others be there. If those ones are there, no, you don't need to really create these allocations without the agreement of the parties. And of course, the parties are aware that they don't want to give a decision power to one authority or to one party that takes all decisions. Because one of the deadlock was that the party was saying the responsibility sharing under the command structure is to balance power and order, so that one part does not run with 100% power. So if they make, there must be a room of they gaining the other party acceptance. And that's why the concept of consensus is the principle of making decisions is very important. So my answer to you is that I will urge every South Sudanese, let's be patient. The parties within the negotiation, Sudan is going to continue mediating in defining the positions that are shared within the command structure. And that's why you can hear His Excellency President Salva saying some of the generals in defense and security institutions should be prepared to quit their position, and the position is going to be reconstituted and occupied by opposition. And opposition, this goes to the forces of IO and to the forces under SOA, which are many of them, as I said, it's not only one force. There's quite a number of forces under SOA there. So my answer is that let's be patient, let's avoid creating, because soon in social media, I've already seen pop-up distribution of power from commander-in-chief, chief of staff, IG, people start doing allocation. And even some have seen already, have gone to tribal. You know, if this Gebila Nasfelan Jaini, that's Gebila Falan Jaini, that's Gebila Falan Konalan, Gebila Falan Nini, they're all equal, Didana. So these things, I think we need to really avoid it. And my call to South Sudan is that let us be patient and let us support the leaders. Let's hold them accountable to their responsibility they are holding under the Constitution of the Republic, and make sure that they should not run away with it. It's until when we start making propaganda, then they get the chance of running away with it. But we should be watchful. And still, I'm repeating, there are more detailed documents coming out with titles, positions, and distribution of the titles and position under the command structure.
Thank you so much. This is a milestone. If they are accomplished this is a real milestone. I have one of the two gentlemen in the clubhouse. What if you can hear me? Can you open your mic if you have a question to ask?
Oh yeah, you know, actually I was wondering. After I see, yeah, what's up?
Hang on, Joshua.
Yeah, because my battery is getting down. Your voice is not clear. It is a problem. I just want to ask a question. Maybe can you tell this guy that is in the network?
That's what your network is breaking down. We cannot even hear you.
Yeah. So I was wondering after I see your show, and I didn't know, and then I went and I clicked, and I found that the read is stalemate. Fella, this is good, but the problem is this, your brother. Before I had my question, and let's do these brothers. They are not honest, because why I'm saying this. After I read, the disclassification of 2013-2016, that alone is an indication. But these brothers are not honest. So my question to the gentleman: if the report was released, hiring, a foreign lawyer from the United Kingdom, in Mr. Stephen K, and the South Sudan Supreme Court didn't nullify the coup d'etat of 2013, how do you believe that these brothers here, they will work together and work for the unification of the army, and also they will fulfill an implementation of September 2018? That's my question to you. If you can just give me an honest, because the way I see it, I have lost trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Agwat. That's a question coming from Agwat in Clubhouse. You can go ahead and answer it.
Obviously, there's a big question whether this report release contain an influence or doesn't contain an influence. The reality is that this report, it is released at a late moment, but it contains no big impact except it play a role in reminding people. And of course, it depends on whoever is affected by the report interpretation. And remember, President during the nation address say, whoever names appear in the report is given a presidential pardon. That means this report will never be used to implicate anybody whose name appear in the report, or punish anybody whose name appear in the report, or feel that we don't trust you if your name appear in the report. So what my brother was saying, but it is a reminder of a set of mind towards availing will and commitment for implementing the agreement. So one thing that I'd like to say is that this report was released at a critical moment that, for me, I feel this report could have been kept not released. Why? Because you have the following processes. You have a regional process under the AU Commission of Inquiry, under the president, the former president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, that disqualified the concept of coup. And of course, His Excellency President have mentioned that. But secondly, also, there's a national process. Our judiciary, our Supreme Court have held some prisoners accused of designing a coup. Among them, we have quite a number of people, Ezekiel Lul, and some quite a number of FDs. And you can have those of March Paul and the rest. They have been undergoing trial in the prison. Even Pagan was part of them. They've been undergoing trial for designing a coup. And the court ruled that there's no indicator of coup attempt. After even similar tapes were presented to the court, and the court threw it away and ruled that. So I feel that in terms of confidence and trust building, those two processes could have been used to silence the concept of the coup that has come. Of course, Stephen from London as a lawyer is a private sector. Getting that amount of money, if it is real that I've received that amount of money, is money for his pocket, for his farm, to do his job. Of course, he described himself as a well-qualified person in similar situations in Yugoslavia and Rwanda, by his description of himself. But I would say, but also another thing, another interpretation of this report is that this report may aid critics of the incumbent system by saying, if you go to the concept of a war crime against humanity, of systematic killing of particular groups, somebody may say the way this report is recorded might offer opportunity for decision for systematic killings. Of course, President have said this mainly to tell the truth about the root causes of 2013 is that it's a coup. That's from the president, the root cause is a coup. And of course, this also raised some legal questions in terms of data protection. Do we have any law that provide protection of the data, and that consent is being taken in terms of data protection? So I would say I know people may have their different personal position in the interpretation of this report, but I'll say this report may not have huge impact. Anyway, I would like to say, before even this report was released, what is the level of trust and confidence that the parties have to implement the agreement? 2 years back, before this report, the level of trust and confidence is very low. Even if you release this report, still the level of trust and confidence among them is very low, mistrust is very high. So that's what I'm saying. Part of our responsibility as a different South Sudanese, now different constituency, is for all of us to contribute in creating an environment where our leaders should regain trust and confidence. But when you get a chance with them, we better tell them the only historical advantage you have now is when you trust your other partner and you're able to work together without mistrust to reach there. But partly also, we need to raise a concern and we need to raise a civic orientation to various South Sudanese, those of us who have gone to school, specifically the elites, in our various capacity. We need to start building culture that transfer of power from one person to another person, from one entity to another entity, have to be in an honorable and peaceful manner. This tendency where we feel violence is the option for transferring power from one entity to another entity, we need to stop it because it affects us in our national building process. It affects us in our social cohesion within our communities. It affects us wherever we are. Even you can see to the level of universities, institutions of academic learning, institutions are set down because South Sudanese failed to agree to bring a leadership. Juba University leadership shut down, Jongole, Garang University, all over across the country, wherever there's a leadership, there's all disagreement. Remember the Bar Association, they have to split up, and even reach to the level of the churches. Churches, people are shooting AK-47 over leadership of the church. People are issuing statement, Vatican is not democratic by electing a new Archbishop of the Catholic Church. People are fighting over leaderships everywhere. Wherever there's a leadership, people have to disagree. If you bring farmers, you bring cattle herders, you pay, please come together and put a leadership, they will disagree over that. We need to start changing that attitude, that leadership have to be transferred in a peaceful, honorable manner, and we need to have a culture of practicing how we can hand over power from one entity to another, and we must accept that nobody is blessed permanently for position. So for me, these are some of the things that we need to start really building up. I know my brother who have asked the question, he have his personal opinion, he have his own readings, but for me, being on the ground, being here is that the best that I can advise or the best I can offer as an answer is me and you, wherever you are, let's all contribute to push our leaders to regain trust and confidence, to deliver us from the current situation we're in to a better one. And specifically, those of us who are elites, whom we have gone to school, let us start thinking about the language we're using for addressing ourselves, because sometimes language pushes us to use violence as an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Joshua, if you can hear me, so your network good? Joshua? Okay, it seems like you have a network issues. Can you go ahead and answer the question that Santino Majur asked you about it?
Yeah, just let me say, I want to just appreciate him, for the answer that he has given, thank you, Ustaz, for answering the question. But I was wondering, in South Sudan, what supposed to be the national security issue, because releasing such, a very important data, it will, bring back people to the wounds. In the countries who are advanced, such things, such information are withheld at least for 40 or 30 years until those who were involved are dead. But in South Sudan, it doesn't look like that. So I wish, I agree with you also. I and you and others, Medid and Joshua and those fellow citizens on the below, we can try to do our best, but it doesn't sound that we can succeed, even though we will keep trying, because those people who have the money, they have some bad apple, like you said earlier, some bad apples, the spoilers who are around the leadership. They don't want to leave the power, and that is an issue. And I wish, and I will continue to advocate for unity of people of South Sudan. And inshallah, we will defeat these people at the election table if time is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Akwet. Okay, go ahead and answer the question. Two questions coming from Santino Major. He's asking why the unified forces, while every party have their own forces,
and who is going to pay them?
And who is going to pay them?
Yeah. I think one with Santino, thank you very much for the question, is that why are we using the word unified forces? We're using the unified forces because this unified forces is a stage of transforming the various armed groups that were fighting among themselves in 2013, and then another groups merged after the 2016 crisis. They have different naming of forces. If you remember that time, there's nothing called South Sudan People's Defense Force. It's SPLA, SPLA-IO. Then you have South Sudan People Liberation Movement. You have South Sudan Federal Defense Force. You have different titles, acronyms that are many. And I have a map that I showed them that about like 17 armed groups that were fighting in the bush. And all of them are having their commander-in-chief and the chief of staff. So the concept of unification, unified force, is that you unify them coming from various political parties, unify them to become a one party or one force, unify them to become a one force or unified force. Then after being a unified force, in the agreement, there are stages of reforms that have to undergone in the defense and the security sector. For us now to have from a unified force, we transform it to become the national force. And of course, in terms of the national force militarily, we start naming them South Sudan People's Defense Force. So all these forces that are coming from different naming of armed groups, South Sudan People Liberation, whatever, democratic, whatever parties we have from the different commanders in chief, they all will be undergoing the process of being unified as a single force under single command system. Then they end up being transformed through institutional and legislation reforms to build what is called national army or national force. That is the process in the agreement in chapter 2, that we have the word unified. And actually, even I would like to say, maybe I've missed one word. The first word is used, what we call the necessary unified force. Like what we're going to graduate in 2 months' time for the agreement is called necessary unified force. And this is from institution of defense and security. Always shall have those processes happening, coming from different parties. Those some parties only have a military wing. They may not have a police, but then they say, we have a police who have defected and join us and form our group. So, and some will be transformed from police automatically as a sujun, and some go as a security. You know, the way how we build up our things. And that's the concept of unification, is to build them as a unified force. Then they undergone those reforms that are enshrined in institution and legislation to build the national army, which is already called South Sudan People's Defense Force constitutionally. That need to be named, and that's what we're aiming at. Who is going to pay them? We're going to pay them with South Sudanese money. Nobody's going to pay them. And part of the responsibility is that our revenue source, we need to start using them well. And that's why I'm saying in some platforms that there are South Sudanese who are very harsh by saying, you know, this is a South Sudanese problem, needs South Sudanese solution. Normally say, don't end up here. Say this is a South Sudanese problem, needs South Sudanese solutions with South Sudanese money. So we are going to use the oil money to pay our forces, whether oil money or non-oil source of revenue, we're going to pay our force. And that's why the idea of unifying is also to seize the numbers, to reduce the numbers from this big number to a smaller number that is affordable to the national budget, or affordable to the national envelope, the resource envelope that want to go. Of course, the question is, are we ready for DDR process so that we can accommodate those who may not qualify to be among the unified forces in various defense and security institutions? That's the next question. And normally, I like to say that you can't talk about transitional security process minus effective commitment for successful DDR, because you have a DDR that will accommodate those either based on the age or physical fitness may not qualify, or educational background may not qualify to certain position responsibilities. Then you bring them to DDR, you reintegrate them back to the site and you give them alternative exit strategy from the uniform to another different life. So for me, that's what's going to happen. Who is going to pay them? We're going to pay them from our money. Nobody's going to pay them from outside. So it depends on political commitment that we may have as South Sudanese, specifically our leaders. If our leaders commit themselves, by the way, the cost of financing violence is sweet. The cost of stabilizing peace is always bitter, because at the violence, there's shortcuts for easy making of money. But in peace, there's a bureaucratic system of questioning the use of the money. And normally it becomes bitter. That's some people want violence to continue so they make money. They don't want peace to continue because peace control them in accessing public resources. So that's why I promoted that. Let's have peace so that we don't waste a lot of money for the security and defense. And then this one translates to that. So we are going to pay them And why they call unified force? Because they come from various armed groups that have been fighting by then. As I said, under SOA, there are more than 5 armed groups, and IO is one, and SSPDF is one.
So the next question that I'm going to ask you is about the generals. Okay. Joshua, yeah, go ahead. Yes. So go ahead, Yokani. Did you hear everything that he said? Yeah, 3 questions.
I didn't get it clear. I don't know if you can translate for me. I couldn't really pick him.
Yeah, network is really. Go ahead and answer what you can catch. So he have a network issues.
Yeah, I think I didn't get him clear. I think for me, in terms of, I've never catch him very clear. One of the things that I like to refer to from this particular point of today, what is next that we need to see? Next thing we need to see His Excellency President taking the responsibility of driving the process of the president's meeting as an instrument that will make them regain trust and confidence. And because if really in 1 week time, if reconstitutes the command, the structure of the command, now political energy is required. And I think that is really a primary responsibility of the president, to show trust and confidence and political will and commitment to work together with the other parties and push the country towards the destination that we need to head to. The challenge, the timeline left right now is not enough for them to do much required, because as we're speaking now, part of the security arrangement task that we're saying now, these are, some of them are pre-transitional period and early transitional beginning. This could have done with them 2 years ago, but now we're starting them in almost left with 8 or 9 months to end up there, to end the agreement. And obviously, likely there's chances that the presidency may trigger any provision of the article of the agreement in terms of the lifespan of the agreement. But for me, I feel the president have a big responsibility to go there. And in terms of one of the things that I hear from him, but he asked, like the first question came from the first question, the first interview, the first person who asked the question around the question of distribution and how fair will distribution be. The principle of distribution that is coming up is that it's a question of controlling authority. Who sits where and who need to make authority where, and when X is making an authority, how can Y consent to that authority, and how can Y use the power not to allow X to run away with decision making. Those are all things that are coming up in the next annex to this particular agreement that was reached. And the other thing that we should be praying hardly is to keep the grantors effective, because it's proven that now our leaders, without an external pressure, they can't move. And of course, we have seen the pressure of Sudan have mounted to this celebration, jubilation we're in now. And remember, His Excellency President said, sustained dialogue is the best way to implement the agreement, because this agreement is facing the following challenges. One, this agreement is facing the challenges of misinterpretation. Sometimes what is written in the agreement, some other people have a different interpretation of what is written in the agreement. So misinterpretation is disturbing the implementation of this agreement. This is one thing. Two is also the question of asking about the generals. Some generals are threatening. They say, then why all this time when I was fighting the bush, you didn't tell me go home when it was violence. Now you see honey coming, you're telling me let me go home. So the question is also, how do you manage the expectations of those generals who may not say, I'm not ready to go home? Because when the violence are there, you're using us. Now there's no violence, honey is coming, you're telling me go home. So what do you offer them as an alternative? When you tell them go home, or you tell them please seize the position, what does that mean? So for me, that means a lot. And also, how can this particular agreement consolidate them as one entity to reach out to the other parties that are not signatories to the River Agreement and the Rome Peace process? Because still we have challenges ahead of us. So for me, the whole thing is centered around regaining and renewal of pledge among the two principles, His Excellency President and First Vice President, to have the political will of saying enough is enough for us subjecting the country to suffer because of the slow implementation agreement. Time has come for us to implement the agreement. So for me, that's what I'll end up as my response. But I couldn't get him very clear, but I hope that I've answered some of the concerns he feels or he wants to raise them through the questions.
Yes. Another question that coming from the guy, let me pull it up, is asking you about what are the legal
implications
of declarified report on implementation of the peace agreement.
Obviously, with the statement of the president that there's a presidential pardoning for whoever his or her name has been mentioned in the report, has been pardoned. The legal implication is that this report is going to affect an action that is coming up, which was commissioned by the president. Remember, when the president was addressing the nation, the president commissioned the Minister of Justice to roll out the process for implementing Chapter 5. That means the transitional justice. And the transitional justice will mean 3 institutions have to come to existence. One institution is the Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation. Another one is Compensation and Reparation Authority. And another one is a hybrid court. So this disclosed report or disclassified reports is going to strengthen the thinking around the transitional justice processes. And some people start going to questioning if, for example, this particular disclosed report will provide any legal evidence for questioning, for legal questioning of responsibility and duty with regards that with an issue that related or contribute to committed atrocities from 2013 until now. If this report contains some elements that can be used as evidence in the court of law, for example, like in hybrid court, yes, that will have legal implications. And the question is, if you start taking them to be used in the court of law, like hybrid courts, and you start questioning the data that are in this report, then you start asking some legitimate or some legal questions. Is the report content balanced between the actors? So some of the actors may be named as suspects and perpetrators, and some of the actors may be named as the victims. Are the voice of the other suspect being counted for when this report has been written? Were they been asked, we heard your voice, you say this, why do you say this? Can they give a consent? Can they have a confirmation? Those are some of the legal interpretations if you take this particular information to be used in a court of law. And I think it have already provided some thinking around the transitional justice. Now, this report have told us very clear who need to start rolling out forgiveness. Who is suspicious of who? This report have tell us very clear. So it means we're going to have some individuals have to start saying, I have forgiven you, though I have seen your name being disclosed in that report that you are among those who triggered the country to suffer from the current situation that we're faced. So we have names that have to show symbolic forgiveness in front of the citizens of South Sudan so that it opens a window for more forgiveness. Then the question is the political will there? This one thing. Secondly, this report also legally will have implication on elections in terms of contesting for elections. But good enough that President have mentioned as a presidential pardoning. It means the legal interpretation of this particular report is subject for the president pardoning. It means you can't really walk away with it and run with it away since the president have pardoned people by saying, oh, we have seen you as a suspect in that report, so your candidature for electoral position is questionable since president have pardoned them already. And that means the pardon of the president have made this report only to be a sharing of information rather than really a document that can be used. But obviously, in the transitional justice, it will have legal implication in terms of what nature of forgiveness we need, who are the people we need them to show symbol of forgiveness that will open a window for other people to follow. Because this report have disclosed names that they have to have a handshake like the one of Kenya between Raila Odinga and Uhuru. My brother, I have forgiven you. And you go public in a public event, and it's also I have forgiven you. Let's shake hands. And then you find people physical saying, and then you say hallelujah, because I've shake hands. Though the report have brought their names up. So I think these are some of the challenges that the report offered in terms of working around transitional justice and the legal implications. But other legal implications, so this report have disclosed to us that right now, the way how the data were being tapped, it brings a legal question. Do we have a law on data protection? Is our personality really trusted that nobody will use our personal data for certain purposes? So that is another legal implication that the report have brought, that actually we need to start questioning the aspect of protection of the data. So we need to have a legislation on protection of data, because if we have law on protection of data, they need to undergo certain processes for telecom companies to allow certain state agencies to tape record other people. So these are all implications that this particular report have brought. And so I'm quite sure with the politicians, as elections are going to come, protection of data become a big question, become a big issue. And you have known in our neighbor here in Kenya how the big issue of data protection become a big issue between activists and between citizens. And already we have seen the picture that you have displayed. That picture symbolically shows trust and confidence. And we hope that that trust and confidence can be translated in action. Like that look great, but always the devils are in the details. And I hope that that hold of hands will be translated in the actions from tomorrow onwards, and make sure that uniforms are out of the streets. And I wish that actually they would have addressed the nation jointly after that raising of hands. The same people who raised their hands would have come to a TV of SSBC and addressed the nation and show the nation. But of course, we need to see much more from their actions rather than from their symbols that they're showing us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have another question coming to Wilson. Wilson, if you can hear me, you can open your mic and ask your question. Wilson, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Madid.
Yeah.
Kind of having a little bit headache, but thing to do with South Sudan always somebody want to know exactly and put your own opinion, because the country is all of us. I just come late and I see there is breaking news about the President Kiir and Vice President, but I don't know what they reach into, whether it is but I had some others thought that they agree on security arrangement. So my question was, if they agree, what portion of the agreement they agree has got so many IO. So logically, they cannot be fit to be given that portion again, because there is IO Taban, IO Tata Garwitwal, IO Dual Rich, IO Tamunumun. So, the question, what percentage they agree to in terms of dividing the percentage through military infrastructure? I don't know whether it was asked before or not. One of other problem too, it turned out that the organization of the IO is not the way that military work all over the world. And I knew that if there are any problem of the so-called senior or general, it is Riek Macher who brought this one in 1991. He used to reward his own fighters, give them a rank that cannot be found. So the question that was in Kunfisriya Kamel, well, Katiba, let's say Katiba Alif Shaksi. And you will find, almost within 700 is all officer, from captain to general. And I believe he was told last year.
Wilson, you are network breaking down. Wilson, can you hear us? Okay. Yeah, he's having a network issue. So yeah, you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, thank you. Is Wilson still asking, or can I answer Wilson?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Stop there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Wilson, in terms of responsibility sharing, it is 60 for incumbent government. That means under His Excellency President Salva Kiir, as a Commander-in-Chief of South Sudan Defense Force, is take 60% of responsibility sharing in the command structure. Opposition, and opposition does not refer only to IO. Opposition refer to forces coming from IO and forces coming under SOA. And SOA is not under one command, so also have forces within SOA. So opposition goes with 40% of the responsibility sharing under the command structure. And that means opposition is going to share the 40 among themselves between SPLIO and SOA. And SOA further is going to share among themselves the factions that bail what is called the armed force of SOA, because they come from different forces. But the benefits is that they have agreed to unify the command structure so that we have one particular person. In terms of the promotions and the ranking, to be honest, there's a lot of corruption around that. In all the parties that signed the agreement, there's a huge corruption in terms of promotions and ranking that are really, even some are self-promotions, by the way. I'll tell you, one time I was in a Western Baragazal town of Wow. There's a market called Loco Market. I went to Loco Market. I found a civilian selling ranks. Start from 1 star to the highest rank in a civilian shop. I asked him, I said, my friend, who licensed you to sell these ranks? He said, what is the problem? This is my business. And I say, business on ranks? So people are selling ranks there. And we have seen some promoters, some people promote themselves 2 days. Once they promote themselves, they defect and they join the other side with their new rank. And I usually used to say that the corruption is very high. So I think for me, the question of the process for unifying the forces is another challenge, by the way, to the audience in this one, because if we're going to unify them under standards, professional standards, some people get surprised that they may be asked to occupy a position, but the requirement for that particular position, they may not meet and they may go home. For instance, I'm somebody who's advocating that if you want to unify the forces, I wish 3 exams to be given to them. Written exams, physical fitness, yalla badim adim kulu silagendel asla hada dim al asla kulla. Fiku terkip will disqualify some big ranks to come either join us in the farming society or go to the villages and start burning charcoals, because some of the ranks are very terrible. People who just know how to command a ground find themselves as generals. So one of the challenges is that in the unification of the forces, some of the ranks, whether with IO, with SOA, with SPDF is going to be questioned in terms of their qualification of whether they deserve it. But the good news is that if they can quickly agree, unify the command, that means the system of the security and defense institutions will fix itself. And honestly, we can't accommodate everybody. Some people have to go home. And that's why one of the things we're advocating, for those who have want peace and stability, we say the government have to put money for DDR. Without a proper DDR, we return back to war. Some of these generals, Bitlam and Bilfam, threw a way and just go immediately to the bush and establish a new movement. And remember, still we have hold out groups that have not signed agreement. Some of them, if the unification of the forces is going on and there are no alternative package offered for them under DDR, they may turn their back and go somewhere. And of course, you know, your enemy, when it's receiving your members, they like to announce. Now we have joined defectors who have come from a party X to join party Z, or some of them will go immediately and form new movement and say, now we're a different group. We're fighting the system. Because, so for me, it's a question of really responsible leadership that delivers the unification of the forces. So we can't blame one player among the players that are entrusted by the agreement article 1.1.1 that forms the unity government of national unity as a coalition government to deliver the country. All of them have to share responsibility to fix things and to make us move to a right direction. So for me, that's my answer to my brother who have assigned Samuel or whoever have asked the question, that the ratio is 60 versus 40, 40 will be shared among the IO. And my fear I want to share with him, when I started in the beginning, I say also, I hope that the opposition in sharing the 40% will not drag the feet in terms of timeline. And if SOA is given their share out of 40, SOA should not drag feet. Because we have seen politically how OPP sometimes delays. And we hope that the same experience of OPP political delays in appointing the delegates to various political institutions should not happen in the unification of the forces. We don't see any delay. People have to fit and people have to meet requirements. And that's why for me, one of the things I was today lobbying and pushing some bit of diplomats from Sudan and Uganda and bit from Ethiopia, the Minister of Defense, was that the unification requires a methodology. First, define the titles. You define the titles, the positions in the command structure. Now define qualification. You say, okay, these are the qualifications. These are the positions we have in the command structures, and each position, these are the qualifications. Then you take yours, but meet the criteria of the qualification so that we have a right person in the right place, because this unified structure is the foundation for our national defense and security force. So if we have them in a very good way, it would happen there. So that's what I'd like to really share. I've seen a question here asking, when do you think Kitgwang IO will unify? I don't know if I can take up that question.
Yeah, go ahead, take that question up. Go ahead, answer it.
Obviously, this question is a right question that I asked by our colleague Marco. This is the implications of, these are the implications of defections. For Kitgwang defectors and other IO defectors, for example, in the state of Western Bargazal in WOW, the inhaler called High Kamsin, they have to face integration into SSPDF because they become part of SSPDF. And then it's SSPDF taking them to the unification processes. They can't be unified as a Kitgwang IO alone. Like the agreement which was signed some hours ago in Juba does not acknowledge defectors as different entities. Defectors become part and parcel of South Sudan People's Defense Force. And there's an article in the ceasefire agreement, or in chapter 2, article 2.something, 2.4 something, or 2.1 something 4. There's an article which says allies of any part that is signatory to the agreement have to benefit from any process through them, the party or the entity they pay their allegiance to. So Kitgwang pay their allegiance to SSPDF, they have to be integrated into SSPDF, then they will face the unification. Now, whether will they get share in the command structure, it is depending on the faith and the will of SSPDF to give them positions there. And when they come there, they're no longer coming as Kitgwang, they're coming as part of South Sudan People's Defense Force that face the unification. Maybe the other thing I want to bring to the attention of the audience is that with the signing of this agreement today in Juba, and if by Friday, President unify the command structure, the immediate challenge is a slogan. What will be the national slogan for our army? Because Woye is for one party. It's not a unified slogan. Viva is not a unified slogan. Take a boom or take a bomb. So it's not a unified slogan. So out of warrior, Viva, take a boom, we need to have a unified slogan, because otherwise our army, if you are going to graduate in 2 weeks' time, what slogan will they shout? Because normally morale of security and defense is under slogan. It means the command structure, once is constituted in 1 week time, they have to adapt a new slogan for our defense, for our security, and for our law enforcement agencies. So that during the graduation of the unified forces, they graduated with a new slogan. Otherwise, some will still shout, "Oh yeah, Viva, take a boom." Now, yeah, how shows that you're unified? So these are some of the challenges that practical that we need to really respond to when the command is structured. They have to take responsibility in addressing this in terms of even symbols. We need to start unifying symbols because we have conflicting symbols. So all these things are the responsibility of the unified structure. And that's why earlier the command structure is unified, the better they will answer some of these silent issues that are linked with the building up of a national army in terms of slogan, in terms of symbols, because they're very important in terms of that. And number two, the more also you unify the structure, then the respect of military order, of ranking comes in, because some people say, I will not salute you because I don't know who you are. I will salute the person who I know who is. So saluting of officers, all these are issues that the unified command structure have to address before ending by 2 months graduating unified forces.
Yeah, and this thing is a very big challenge, you know. I see even the military, those don't have rank. And then those people who join opposition and they come back later on and they have rank. So, and those people who were already in SPLA, which is South Sudan Defense Forces now, what they call, and they don't have rank. This will be a challenge to them, you see, and how the government will deal with those kind of issues. And another thing too about those generals, there are so many generals. So how, okay, if they told this general go home, okay, what will be percentage, like the money that they pay to them? Are they will be given the retirement, the military retirement, so they can have portion of their payment while they will be at home, and they will be no more longer they will be a civilians. And then will the government have the system that they can pay those veterans that are no longer active in duty? So go ahead.
I think one of the issues I've mentioned is ranking, promotions. I remember sometimes you may be in SPLA before 2013, and you may be junior. You may be a 1-star or 2-star officer, and you run somewhere here and there, and you become back as a brigadier. You have to make a long jump in the shortest period of time, and your colleague who was professional, who was senior than you, you're now senior than him. By qualification, don't qualify to be senior to him because he is senior by military system. How do we manage that? These are really issues of the unified structure. And that's why the importance of unifying the structure before graduating the forces is very important, because it has to answer that. But also the command structure that is unified, it has to define qualification and criteria for every single position. Because if you don't qualify me losing my big general position, then I feel you target me. I feel you're against me. Now, if you qualify me losing, you have come with a criteria that make me lose the rank I have. Then the next thing is, do we have a DDR process that will integrate me? And even by the way, let me tell you, there are some people in uniform who are not ready to continue. They're ready to give up the uniform ranks and they want to go to civilian life and they need to be reintegrated. And that's why one of the biggest concern I have, that actually among the term of reference of the command structure, it's really facilitation of a successful DDR process. If we have DDR process, we can handle this issue of generals and those who have no ranks, who may feel discontented in reconstituting the command structure and even the structure below the command structure, because some people are going to lose the size, because when say command structure also have to decide on what is the size of defense, of security, of law enforcement for the Republic of South Sudan, and state level, what will be the size of the state police? All those questions are obligation of the responsibility of the command structure that is unified, and the National Defense Committee, the National Security Committee. So for me, that's why it's very important that timely we should support the unification of the structure to answer some of these questions that I've mentioned, issue of slogans, issue of ranking, because you have unified the command structure now. The next step is unification of ranks, because these ranks need to be unified. What qualifies somebody to be a major in maybe in opposition, and what qualifies somebody to be a major in the SSPDF? When somebody qualified to be a major in the SSPDF with certificate, and somebody qualified to become a major with degree from opposition, or somebody with certificate from opposition, and somebody as a major with degree from SSPDF, how do you equate? How do you unify those ranks? Those are very important steps. And the command structure have to stand up to the responsibility in ensuring they assert law and order and rule of law, to make sure that people respect rule of law, and rule of law is applied without any form of discrimination or without any compromises, regardless of whether you come from, you belong to who, because in South Sudan we have this tendency. Eddie Monekan is son of the veteran commander, and then who liberated this particular, so let us reward him with this rank. These things must go. He's a veteran. My father have died with his veteranism, whatever he is there, he remained there. I must meet the standard of what qualifies me under the decision of the infrastructure. So for me, those are the process that the infrastructure is very important that I have to handle. I can see questions popping up, but thank you very much. I wait for you.
That question is very important. He's asking, what if anyone is in a uniform on the unification process? He can abandon the uniforms. Is that what? Is that a what?
What's next exactly?
Yeah.
There are people who are really in uniform and who are tired of being in uniform. They want to abandon the uniform. And that's why the DDR process is very important. Some of the people who voluntarily want to leave the uniform, we should have a DDR process that offer them package to pick up their life. And that's what I'm saying. Part of security reform and transformation in the country is part of setting up a good package under DDR process. That if a volunteer say, I want to go, then you give me a proper integration process. For example, you can say, okay, if voluntarily you want to leave uniform, the nation is offering you this package. Maybe many people may give in for uniform. If I realize that the package that you're giving me integrate me to the society and I pick up a better life than remaining in uniform, many people may voluntarily decide, okay, want to leave uniform and to go pick up new life. Because there are some people who are forced to be in uniform. And that's why the responsibility of really the structured command system have to think of those concerns that are raised right now in this particular platform. If I voluntarily, as a young person, I feel I was forcefully recruited to the uniform, and time has come for me to say, enough is enough for uniform, I want to join civilian life. What do you offer me? Or even if you have a proper package for civilian, for integration of somebody from uniform to civilian life, some people may say, okay, I've seen that package, is a good package for my future. Though I willingly come and join uniform, time has come for me to say, enough is enough in uniform, I want to start new life, passion. So this is really a big issue of responsibility of our government institutions to stand up to the responsibility and provide packages of exiting uniform and going to a civilian life, or reintegration from uniform to the society, to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. My last question will be the last question. It's about the rollout group. So Soma group, which is not, let me break it down. The process of Tamis Chipilo, NAS, and General Malunga one. So are these processes roll out? How what they will do with these people? Because they are not a part of the agreement, but what they will do if they, I know they are still having a peace negotiation with this group. So what will they where they will put this process of Thomas and Malone?
You know, following this agreement on unification of the command structure, if those who have responsibility to unify the command structure, take the responsibility seriously, and take the responsibility with full political commitment. The advantage of you first unifying the various forces under the revitalized government of national unity to become a solid one force offers an opportunity of constructive mediation with the whole outgroups or with the parties that are not signatory to the agreement, being it Soma under Thomas Rilo or Soma under Malong. Of course, you know that also they have political giants behind them with the Malong Pagana Mumis that side. I'm quite sure we are Denga Jack in that side. With Thomas, you have another side also with him, some politicians. So the more you stabilize the government of national unity, the more you demonstrate political will and commitment in the government of national unity, you may answer some of the concerns that those who are not sticking to the agreement that might have raised as a strength of negotiation. You may answer them and you may keep them as something not of importance. For example, if you roll out constitutional making process, if you're able to translate federal system practically on the ground, if you're able to unify the army and they become professional, that meets standards, some of the agendas that have opposition outside the groups that signed the agreement may become irrelevant, but that is depending on how much political will that those who are under the government of national unity come together as one entity. Because if they come together, and by the way, they should not make a mistake that they will use confrontation as a strategy. Those who are signatory to the agreement, their strength is depending on how much they are confronted. That's the legitimacy, by the way. The more you confront them, the more you give them legitimacy. The more you bring them to the table, the more you lose their legitimacy. So confronting these forces should not be an interest of the unified forces. Actually, unified forces should be embracing more of dialogue under, or the leadership under the government of national unity in terms of politicians, president, first vice president, other vice presidency. And when it comes security-wise, in terms of chief of staff and other structure of command and defense, the more they come one entity from their various parties and they embrace peace processes, the more they have the opportunity of regaining the will of those who are not signatories. But the more they think that let's go and crush them militarily, the more you're giving the legitimacy, and the more those who are discontented with you can easily find an accommodation of defecting and going, I'm not any more comfortable with Juba. I'm now joining the opposition and fight the same in Juba. So for me, it's a question of wisdom, is a question of political will. Because the more you implement the revitalized agreement, the more you answer some of the concerns that those who are not signing to the agreement have been answered. So for me, it is the will of those who have the government now to show the rest of those who are not signing to the agreement that we are committed to have professional army that meet professional standards, that we are committed to have good system of governance, and this system of governance, we have exercised it both physically and we have used it in terms of institutional division of responsibility and political jurisdictions between one structure and other, between one level and the other. That for me is very important. So peace process is the only option for us to bring on the table the Soma. Confrontation is not an option completely. So for me, those are political decisions that the political leadership in the national unity government have to take, and the structured command have to take. And the structured command should not embrace confrontation as an approach. That for me to say. And of course, the more they implement the agreement with its spirit and letter, the more actually put pressure on those groups that have not signed the agreement to rethink twice about their legitimacy of being out. So implementation of the revitalized peace agreement by spirit and letter, it actually gives the government strength to bring on the table those who are not signatories. But the more they mess up with the implementation, the more they give legitimacy for those who are not signatories. So that will be my message I'd like to convey and answer your questions. And I don't know whether this is the last opportunity I have to draw my conclusion to your audience that are following up this particular platform.
Yes, yeah, you can go ahead and put your conclusion. So we are coming to an end. Yes, there's no more question that I can put it in. So you explain a bit then. Yeah, go ahead, put your conclusion.
My conclusion is, as South Sudanese, I like to start with this phrase: wherever you are, whatever position you hold, whatever tribe you belong to, you must stand up for the nation. And when you're standing up for the nation, you stand up for the nation as a nationalist. Nationalist is defined by not always embracing a particular system of discrimination against others. So my message to the audience that are listening here is that if you want to be a nationalist, embrace democratic and good governance. And violence is not the option. And never ever use a particular view that you want to sanction the views of others. That will not help you. But we are hoping that with this new agreement which was signed some few hours ago, that our leaders will take primary responsibility, that actually they have it at the offices they hold under the agreement to transform the country from the situation we're in now to a better situation. Otherwise, if we aid a conflicting interpretation of the political situation, we're aiding them to use violence for keeping the country as a hostage to their political grievances. So finally, let God bless us. Let God use our various position and level of influence for building the nation we want, and be among those whose name is written to good books of the better history of South Sudan, wherever you're doing. Social media colleagues, hostile propaganda, and these particular political sentiments that incite violence, let's stop it, because South Sudan is above violence. South Sudan is for peace, stability, and for its generation to be proud like any other citizen of any other nation in the world. We have the primary responsibility to make South Sudan great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate for coming in and give us a detail about this agreement. It's a really good that we see that these two parties leaders, they are coming together and they put the interests of people first and leave. This is one of the things that security arrangement is one of the big challenge that hold all the peace agreement back. And if they agree and they have that, they agree 100% that they will go ahead and unify all the forces, and then security will come to an end. This is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for coming in, and we will bring you back again if there's more breaking news that they add into this agreement. I thank you. Have a wonderful night. I know it's late over there in Juba, so have a good night. Yeah,
it's a responsibility. Have a good night, and thank you. Yeah. And thank you for the audience.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah, have a good night.
Thank you very much.
It's your boy Young Love. I give him that treatment. Pancho leg stand and punch America. Panye door the banaban. Pancho leg stand and punch America. Panye door the banaban. Walk on your leg. Kankaro what on a watching. Oga level leg. Gear pow. Very leg. Panda with ya. Punch America. Panye. Dwalabano, Chingatongo Pandon, Kujura by a checker, Pakupanda Jiro, what there be Dwalaventing. Stand up Panchi America, Panje Dwal, Banaban, Panta leg stand up Panchi America, Panje Dwal, Banaban, walk on your leg, Kankaro, what on a watching, Oga level leg, Gear, Pow, very leg, Panda with ya, Panchi America, Panya Dwalabano, Chingatongo Pandon, Kujura by a checker, Pakupanda Jiro, what there be Dwalaventing.